Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the Cultural Integration Fellowship. I'm very happy to have Santosh back, who is going to speak on matters concerning evolution and how we can participate in this evolution which is going on. Um, I'm sure you're familiar with this fact that integral yoga is a world transforming yoga. Of course, individual liberation is extremely important. The entire yoga is predicated on that. But the journey does not end in liberation, it does not end in moksha. There's still some traveling to do. In fact, it is after that that a profound collaboration with the force of the mother begins to happen. And it is from that perspective, in its ultimate sense, that individual and world transformation has to be undertaken. But on that issue, it will be Santosh who will be shedding more light. So let me just quickly introduce him, despite the fact that he does not need any introduction. Santosh has been studying Sri Aurobindo, Sri Aurobindo's writing since 1971 and has a daily blog at sriaurobindostudies.worldpress.com and podcast located at anchor.fm forward slash Santosh Dash Krinsky. He is the author of 20 books and is the editor in chief at Lotus Press. He is the president of the Institute for Wholistic Education, a non-profit focused on integrating spirituality into daily life. Video presentations, interviews, and podcast episodes are also available on the YouTube channel www.youtube.com forward slash at Santosh Krinsky 871. One word, Santosh Krinsky 871. So before I hand over the screen to Santosh, I want to read a poem from Dr. Haridas Chaudhary's collection, The Rhythm of Truth. And the title of this poem is Creative Action. Truth is freedom, and freedom is joy. Life is joyful expression of truth and freedom. Life is the rhythm of light breaking through darkness. It is the dance of spirit in the heart of matter. The music of silence beneath all surface turmoil. The drama of the unseen visible in tears and laughter. When a glimpse is caught of the formless light, when the message is heard from the soundless word, when the path is cleared for the gateless gate, the cup of life is filled to the brim with the ecstasy of creative action. Let's meditate for a minute at least, and then I will hand over the screen to Santosh. We'll come back, Santosh. Over to you.
Well, thank you. I'd like to, first of all, welcome everybody who's joined us here today. And little housekeeping stuff. Looks like everybody's muted your microphones, which is great. But we do expect to have some time for what I find to be the most interesting part of these talks is some conversation between all of us after the end of the presentation. So we'll leave some time for that. We're going to do something a little bit unusual this time. We sort of have these formulae that we accept after having studied Sri Aurobindo for many years, that the evolution of consciousness developed forms, and basically there's this evolution in process. But I don't know, until recently, I wasn't really much concerned about, well, okay, let's look at the process and see what it looks like and see how it begins to correspond with what the scientists have to say about how these things happen. So actually the title for the discussion today that I sent in was The Evolution of Consciousness and the Course of Time, Our Spiritual Destiny. And it turned into Spiritual or Collective Destiny, which is fine because that's where it was going. But we're going to spend some time going through a brief history of time. With all due deference and respect to Stephen Hawking, we're not going to go back to the Big Bang or beyond that to whatever came before. Let's start just with the age of the Earth when we get there. So, as Kundan mentioned, historical yogic practice focused on individual salvation or liberation. And it was all an individual effort. And it didn't really have an impact on anybody or anything else specifically. It wasn't geared towards that. The integral yoga focuses on the evolution of consciousness and the transformations needed to establish what Sri Aurobindo calls the next stage of that evolution beyond the mental level that we now experience and share with each other. And he called that the supra-mental, beyond the mind. So if we look back at the history, first let's think about for a moment whether all of this just happens randomly, whether forms come up, and because the forms develop, somehow consciousness is created by matter, which has been a philosophical position taken by many, many people over many years. In fact, there was a theory called the infinite monkey theory that said if you give a monkey infinite time and a typewriter, they're going to recreate all of the works of Shakespeare. Okay. And that theory actually held some prevalence because under the laws of random chance that were held by this segment of humanity, of course, that is possible. And if there's infinite numbers of universes and infinite possibilities, well, you could say, okay, it could happen. Well, actually, a few years ago, some scientists and mathematicians in Australia did some research on that, and they came out with a mathematical model using the same underlying mathematics that said that a monkey could theoretically do it, but it would take longer than the lifetime of the entire universe for that to happen. And therefore, it was not a realistic scenario. Then they said, well, okay, what happens if we take all 200,000 monkeys that exist on the planet and put them to work sort of serially in parallel to each other, could they do it faster? And that also didn't work. So I think we can put the infinite monkey theory to bed finally, and understand that forms do not create consciousness, but consciousness creates forms. If we look at it, everything we see around us, we don't put up these square boxes with plumbing and electricity and everything, and then say, oh, well, maybe we can live in that. It happens the other way. We say we need a place to live, so let's plan for how to create a space that works for us, for our bodies and our vital energies and our needs. And we design, and then we build houses. So form follows function, planning leads to structure, and consciousness creates the material forms. With that background, we follow what Sri Aurobindo basically said in Savitri, and I'll read a very brief passage here. This is the sailor on the flow of time. This is world matter's slow discoverer, who, launched into this small corporeal birth, has learned his craft in tiny bays of self, but dares at last unplumbed infinitudes, a voyager upon eternity's seas. And so let's voyage with Sri Aurobindo and this sailor through time. So going back to the age of the Earth, you could say, using carbon dating and various other techniques, scientists say that that's about 4.5 billion years ago. And if we look at the first evidence of life emerging, it took 220 million years for the first signs of life to come out at 4.28 billion. Now, please excuse me if, I'm taking information from scientists and there's a rounding error here of 20 or 30 million years. That's sort of inconsequential in these timelines. So don't hold me to it that exactly at 4.28 billion years ago, the first signs of life emerged. The first signs of photosynthesis were 3.4 billion years ago, but it was without oxygen. And the first evidence of life on land was 3.2 billion years ago. An important step happened 2 billion years ago. That's 2.5 billion years after the Earth was formed. There was the development of what are called eukaryotic cells. Eukaryotic cells are cells with membranes and a complex internal structure. And that's important because that becomes the basis of all of the beings that we later see emerge. Plants, fungi, animals, everything need this kind of complex cellular structure to create within each cell energy, activity, and various functionality. So the eukaryotic cells have this internal development, and that includes things like mitochondria, which are the energy-producing organelles, chloroplasts, which in plants are the cells which convert sun energy into their material energy and their ability to create plant forms, and also the basis for sexual reproduction eventually. So eukaryotic cells are extremely important. Back about 1.5 billion years ago. That's 500 million years after eukaryotic cells develop. They split into 3 different forms that became the ancestors of modern plants, animals, and fungi. The first recognizable animals, 890 million years ago. For the power of impulsion, because we always say, well, animals have the power of impulsion. Okay, they can move under their own motion. 565 million years ago, or 335 million years after the first recognizable animals. So plants came on land about 515 million years ago, animals 500 million years ago, and those famous dinosaurs 250 million years ago. Warm-blooded proto-mammals 233 million years ago. The dinosaurs died off 66 million years ago. Now, they were coexistent with these original mammals, but they died off entirely with the asteroid and what was the 5th planetary die-off. And I didn't mention the earlier planetary die-offs because these were basically still changes taking place in the Earth's structure that led to one or another catastrophic changes in the way life evolved. The early primates developed about 55 million years ago, the higher primates 40 million years ago, and the great ape diversification 15 to 17 million years ago. And out of that line of development of the great apes, between 2 and 2.8 million years ago, the first appearance of the human genus, the Homo genus, appeared. And that was not modern man. Modern man, Homo sapiens, I use that term advisedly, appeared about 300,000 years ago, or about 2 million years after the first human species appeared. And we still share 98.4% of the genes with the chimpanzee after millions and millions of years. About 11,000 years ago, humans came to totally dominate the planet. And right now, we're living through the 6th mass extinction event, human-induced. And that becomes important because it provides an impetus for what needs to happen next, for the next stage of evolution to occur, and for humanity to participate in that. Because we're now in a race between what you might call love and death. Love in the form of the next evolutionary stage, harmonizing all of the disharmonies that we face, and death in the form of the 6th planetary extinction that can take us with it. So essentially, we're looking at huge spans of time. And Sri Aurobindo and the mother talk about that. People tend to disregard that. They say, oh, the supramental has been fixed into the consciousness of the earth. And I've heard people talking about how they're on the way to being supramentalized personally. And I think that's marvelous if they can do it, but it's not according to what Sri Aurobindo and the mother have said about that, okay? Each major transition that we've discussed led to changes in consciousness that could manifest. The consciousness needed a new form in order to hold and express that next level of energy, that next level of awareness. And so we see that progression with the timelines, that the times are enormous. And we have to keep that in mind. But the line of development is pretty constant. And the way these forms developed, one is through what you might call mutation, where a former form is simply changed. And our friend Charles Darwin tells us that the evolution of forms happens through survival of the fittest and reproduction among those who were the fittest at that level, etc. But another way that it happens is through various lines of development, conscious development, that join forces at various levels and become symbiotic to one another. Now, human beings have become symbiotic to plants. We expel carbon dioxide, which they need to breathe, and the plants expel oxygen, which we need to survive. So we are symbiotes, you could say, one being with the plants, but it goes even deeper. We talked about eukaryotic cells earlier. Well, one of the interesting things that happened is, and I don't know how deep into science everybody has gone, but this is what I've spent my last couple of weeks doing. So you'll have to bear with me a little bit on this stuff. The mitochondria, the energy cells within our cells that convert nutrients into ATP, which is the chemical cellular energy that powers every cell in our body, they do not have human DNA. They have bacterial DNA. They are not human cells, or cell organelles, they're called. It appears that what happened is that at some point, the line of development of beings, of bacteria that could convert nutrients into chemical energy, which we call mitochondria, were absorbed into the multicellular organism, the eukaryotic cells that power plants and animals. And instead of dissolving them, digesting them, we made sort of a treaty with them. And the treaty is, we'll keep you alive and give you a nice, comfortable, warm environment to live in, and you create energy for us. Now, scientists say we enslaved these bacteria to us, but I look at it more as a cooperative venture. Very similarly, none of us would be able to digest any food whatsoever if we didn't have what are called probiotic bacteria in our intestines. We have entire colonies of bacteria that live very comfortably within us and carry out much of the digestive function that we need in order to have the nutrients that create our lives. So we've created another symbiotic relationship with another species, you could say, in order to exist. Interestingly enough, they recently have announced that there is a sea slug in the ocean that is able to do photosynthesis. This is the first animal they found that could do photosynthesis. And the way it happens is these sea slugs eat a certain amount of the microscopic plankton or algae, whatever it is, in the ocean. And instead of digesting the chloroplasts, they incorporate them into their eukaryotic cells. And they can go a year without eating again based on the photosynthesis that goes on. Now, you may all wonder where this is going and why we have to go so deep into this. But the next stage of evolution of consciousness requires new forms. And the mother has made that very clear. She's in various places said, well, maybe in the next stage of evolution, we're not going to need to eat. Or maybe in the next stage of evolution, there won't be sexual reproduction. In other words, there are different ways that this can happen. Now, one of those ways is that genes that we have within us right now that are turned off might be turned on. And for example, there are animals out there that can regrow limbs when their limbs have been cut off. And their stem cells go to work, they know just what to do, and they recreate that limb. Well, those very same genes exist within us, but we're not using them. And so when we lose a limb, it's just, we lost a limb and someone goes out and creates one out of metal or plastic or whatever they do and attaches it to you and hopes that you can do something with that. But we also see these symbiotic relationships develop. And it may be that one of them might be that we incorporate something like photosynthesis into ourselves, just like we incorporated bacteria to run the cellular energy, or bacteria to run the digestive system. So if we could do photosynthesis and convert energy directly from the sun, we wouldn't need to eat. Now, there's another way, and that is that people have been studying for many years the movement of energy through what we call the chakras, the energy centers, the subtle energy centers. And if we can learn how to open those chakras and absorb energy directly, we may not need photosynthesis and we may not need anything else. We may become energy beings. Now, this is all speculation, but it's speculation with a purpose. And that is that it is to push us out of our normal, everyday way of looking at the world from our own individual, egoistic, limited viewpoint and lifetimes, because evolution doesn't take place within the span of one human's life. Everything we've talked about took tens and hundreds or billions of years to occur. And so to say, we're going to practice this yoga and become supramentalized overnight is not realistic, nor is it what Sri Aurobindo and the mother have to say about it. So we are in a race with time right now. And Sri Aurobindo gave us an answer. We, human beings, as part of the evolution, the manifestation, the unfolding of the universal creation, are now at a stage where we can begin to consciously participate in that evolutionary process. Up until now, the process was driving itself through the divine's impulsion through forms that were not self-conscious. Now the divine is driving that process through forms that can be self-conscious. And by doing that, we can begin to consciously participate and support that movement. And as Sri Aurobindo has mentioned, that means that we could speed up the evolution. Now, when you talk about speeding up the evolution, they don't talk in terms of, I don't know, 50 years, 10 years, 20 years, okay? They talk about hundreds of years, maybe thousands of years, which in itself would be considered a miracle from the side of the evolution of the divine manifestation. And the real issue we continually run into is we believe that The world revolves around us. It's our yoga. It's our realization. It's our health. It's our wellness. It's our recognition of things. It's our liberation. But in reality, we are elements of that larger evolutionary process. And we can't look at it in terms of one individual achieving realization. We need to look at it in terms of, and I like to use the example of a relay race, okay? You've got 4 people running a relay race, and they run around the track and carry a baton, and then they give it to the next person. They carry the baton. The next person carries the baton. And it's only the 4th person who ever reaches the finish line. All the other 3 were essential to the process of reaching the finish line, but they never get to see the finish line. All they did was carry the baton for a while and move the process forward. And if we shift out of our own egoistic personalities for a moment and look at it from this wider perspective of the consciousness of time and evolution, which is why we spent so much time earlier going through all those steps. I left out a few, but essentially, we are just carrying the baton forward, and we may or may not even have realizations. Each one of us has a role to play. As Kundan mentioned at the beginning, it's important. And it's important because in order for the next stage of evolution to develop, there has to be both a texturing of consciousness in general among humanity and a change and updating of the forms that can hold and manifest that new level of consciousness, and a receptivity to that energy which is manifesting. It doesn't come from us, it comes from the divine. So with that in mind, let's look at what Sri Aurobindo and the Mother have to say, and I'm going to read just a few quotes here from Letters on Yoga. Sri Aurobindo states, "It would not be possible to change all that, the ordinary life on earth, in a moment. We have always said that the whole of humanity will not change the moment there is the descent. But what can be done is to establish the higher principle in the earth consciousness in such a way that it will remain and go on strengthening and spreading itself in the earth life. That is how a new principle in the evolution must necessarily work. But what we propose just now is not to make the earth a supramental world, but to bring down the supramental as a power and establish consciousness in the midst of the rest, to let it work there and fulfill itself as mind descended into life and matter, and has worked as a power there to fulfill itself in the midst of the rest. This will be enough to change the world and to change nature by breaking down her present limits." So the descent of the supermind is not intended to create a patent universal medicine or change everything in the twinkle of an eye. It isn't going to happen. The Mother emphasized, "The manifestation of the supramental upon earth is no more a promise, but a living fact, a reality. It is at work here, and one day will come when the most blind, the most unconscious, even the most unwilling, shall be obliged to recognize it." And she continues, "This great change is the appearance upon earth of a new race which will be for man what man is for the animal. The consciousness of this new race is already at work upon earth to enlighten all who are able to receive it and heed it." Now, let's say this, we have a short lifetime, we're very impatient. We want realizations. We want to have our own liberation. We want to have experiences. But some people get that. Many people get that because that's their role. But what about those who are here because some element of human life, some element that is blocking and obstructing this energy simply needs to be worked out? Now, they have this famous apocryphal story that Thomas Edison had to fail 1,000 times making light bulbs until he got one to work. What if one of us is here to overcome a certain force of desire or a certain limit of the ego, and we never ever see an experience because we're failing and failing and failing and failing, but moving the baton around the track so that the next generation can pick it up and have a basis for it? It's almost like you're monkey number 22 or number 85 in the 100th monkey theory. Okay, nobody recognizes that. No one knows anything special has happened. But after that 100th monkey happens and there's enough texturing of the consciousness, things can change. And suddenly it becomes a power of all of humanity. And so what we're called upon to do, the individual destiny, is to move beyond our limit within the ego, move beyond our desired ambition to realize, but to try to do whatever we're called upon within our hearts as devotees, as awakened human beings, as aspirants for something greater. Do what we're called upon to do and face all of those obstacles and difficulties and issues and concerns, whether or not we get recognized for it, whether we recognize it within ourselves. We need to keep on keeping on and do it, if we can, cheerfully, in spite of the difficulties and the obstacles. And we become the forerunners of that new race, while not necessarily participating in that in our lifetimes. Because after all, what's 1,000 years in the lifetime of the planet? As we saw, it's not even a rounding error. 20 million years is a rounding error. And for this to happen quickly, we need to do a couple things. One is we need to make sufficient changes that we don't destroy ourselves in the interim. And secondly, we need to keep the aspiration alive and growing and radiating within us and around us so that we create the texture and the opportunity for that higher consciousness, that supramental force which is active on the planet, to take hold, to disseminate itself, and to create the holistic view and the harmony that it is here to resolve, to overcome all of the limitations and gridlock, if you will, that the mental consciousness has created, to overcome the forces of the mind that have led us to our 6th planetary extinction event happening right now. So in Savitri, Sri Aurobindo inspires us with his vision of the role of the individual and the transformation process. I saw the omnipotent's flaming pioneers over the heavenly verge which turns towards life, come crowding down the amber stairs of birth, forerunners of a divine multitude. Out of the paths of the morning star they came, into the little room of mortal life. I saw them cross the twilight of an age, the sun-eyed children of a marvelous dawn, the great creators with wide brows of calm, the massive barrier breakers of the world, and wrestlers with destiny in her lists of will, the laborers in the quarries of the gods, the messengers of the incommunicable, the architects of immortality. Into the fallen human sphere they came, faces that wore the immortal's glory still, voices that communed still with the thoughts of God, bodies made beautiful by the Spirit's light, carrying the magic word, the mystic fire, carrying the Dionysian cup of joy, approaching eyes of a diviner man, lips chanting an unknown anthem of the soul, feet echoing in the corridors of time. High priests of wisdom, sweetness, might, and bliss, discoverers of beauty's sunlit ways, and swimmers of love's laughing fiery floods, and dancers within rapture's golden doors, their tread one day shall change the suffering earth and justify the light on nature's face.
Thank you, Santosh. So much to absorb. And thank you for taking us on a journey of evolution and talking about, our not only our existence but even our evolution needs to be symbiotic. And what has been done earlier needs to be incorporated so that we can develop further. And this is very evident in how the organisms have responded to evolution in the past. That you gave us a lot of evidence for your persuasion. I hope you are turning this into a book, which is absolutely fun, beautiful in the sense that uh, it challenges the dominant evolutionary theory of Darwin, which is the survival of the fittest. And I personally feel that the survival of the fittest can only cause conflicts and disharmony in the world. And that's not a very good place to be. So, the same data can actually be interpreted from a different theoretical framework, which can be beautiful for the humanity.
Mm.
It's not the survival of the fittest, but it is a symbiotic association and relationship amongst organisms, which has caused our evolution. It is evident from what has transpired in the past. So as we dwell on this beautiful topic, I want to open the floor for others to come in, make their comments, and pose questions if they have any. Yes, Arvind, please.
Hi, Santosh. It was an excellent talk. I enjoyed your description of the evolution and a lot of the scientific facts. While you were talking, I was remembering an author. I don't know how many people know here. His name is Peter Russell. He has written, he's a physicist. I think in the 90s, he wrote a book called Global Brain Awakens. I read that a long back. I think I still have a copy. So in that, he connects with some of the facts you were telling in the beginning. They're looking at all the living beings and living organisms. And if you look at the Earth itself is a living organism because it knows how to maintain the percentage of oxygen at a constant level to support the life, and it, in a way, self-sustaining. So from that point, he develops that. Then the whole solar system is a living organism. Whole universe is a living organism. and he connects that with Upanishadic statements. In fact, he is one of the book is translated Upanishads also with somebody else. So that is an interesting development in terms of the evolution. There, one more the question I have is, when we look at the global warming and the facts you mentioned about reduction in biodiversity, it looks like it is engendered by human activities. So in that respect, it looks like the collective consciousness is coming down because humanity as a whole is not able to look at those facts or able to maintain the biodiversity which is created by nature in billions of years. So with that fact, when in that book, Global Brain Awakens, Peter Russell shows a chart that if you look at humanity in the last 50 years, there's a chart showing the last 25 years, the consciousness level is rising very fast. I was wondering, is that really true? Because the way things are happening last 50 years at least, global warming and reduction of biodiversity is going in the opposite direction. So what do you comment on that?
Well, last night I looked out the window and I saw the moon. I said, oh, the moon is half full. And my wife said, why did you say it was half full and not half empty? And I said, because I'm an optimist. So looking at it this way, let's start from our own lives. If everything is wonderful and peaceful and joyful, we tend to sit back and relax and enjoy it and say, well, that's cool. Okay. It's only when we're put under stress of having to deal with a situation that we marshal our resources, focus the consciousness, and take steps to fix it. So the mental evolution has its benefits up to a certain point. And when it reaches a certain stage, it reaches its own limits, its limitations, and you get to what we call gridlock, where nothing can move and no solutions can come out, and we're stuck in all the problems we've created with our unintended consequences. That becomes, to me, a sign of the crisis that humanity needs to now solve. And if it wasn't for that crisis, we would not be taking the steps that we're taking, and we wouldn't take them as effectively and as urgently as we're going to take them, as we are taking them. So to me, this is part of the process. Sri Aurobindo talks about the thesis and the antithesis leading to a new synthesis. And so if the thesis is the mind and the antithesis is the gridlock and limitations of the mind, the synthesis is to develop a new super observer, if you will. I used this example recently with someone, and it went right into their brains. I said, there's a famous experiment about 5 different people who observe an automobile accident from different angles. And they all have different stories, what caused it, how it happened, whatever. And I said, they're all going to argue with each other. However, there's that 6th person who's sitting 6 stories up in a building observing the 5 observers and the accident, who can integrate the positions of the other 5 and find the solution as to what caused the accident, because they can see it from a totally different, higher perspective. So when humanity reaches gridlock, when we reach this stage where everything we're doing is destroying that biodiversity, it's really time for a new consciousness and a focus and an urgency towards a new consciousness to come out. Now, as I said at the beginning, I'm an optimist. There are pessimists who just say we're going to destroy ourselves and it's all going to just go away. And we'll have to wait for the next incarnation of the next yuga to bring forward a new civilization and start all over again. Well, that's what a pessimist might say, but I'm an optimist.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think just at the biodiversity reduction, it is mind-boggling. I think I forget the number, every day something like thousands of species are gone every day.
And some of that may be the intended process of nature. And some of that may be because there's always been a certain amount of that. And some of that may be resulting from human caused changes. And we need to then adapt to that and find out what the next phase is. I mean, are we intended to be pure energy beings and not have a food chain under us? And maybe all these animals that provided a food chain and all these plants that provided a food chain are totally unnecessary, and we're going to go into becoming pure energy. Well, okay, well, maybe some people would say that's where we're heading. I don't quite believe that, but who knows? We can all speculate.
I want to bring in an important piece of information here. You know, people who follow yoga of any kind, have this understanding that the yogis, the genuine ones, that is, develop the capacity to look into the past, present, and the future simultaneously.
Mm.
The mother and Sri Aurobindo definitely uh, had that capacity. And in terms of world affairs, Sri Aurobindo has made certain predictions. In fact, during the Second World War, as he was holding discussions with his disciples, he would make some immediate predictions and they came true. So, one of his predictions is that there would be uh, a third world war. And in that third world war, there would be an axis of communist China with some Islamic nations who would attack India. Uh, and it seems that, that things are sort of unfolding in that direction. Now, this was just the prelude to what I want to say now. There is a particular text, which was written about 600 years ago by some practitioners um, in Puri who have spoken about certain world events that would begin to unfold after 29th March 2025. And these have been captured in the text called Bhavishya Malika Puran. It's one of the Puranas, and Bhavishya basically means the future. Amongst many things, what has been what what has been predicted is that all the five elements of the nature for the next 6 7 years would become very very active, and they would cause destruction in the world. We are seeing these wildfires already. We are seeing storms where none occurred before. We are seeing floods where none occurred before. So, you know, as per this text, there is a transition, a massive one at that, which is in the process. Maybe, this is one of the ways in which the nature is going to um, set things right. And interestingly, this text also talks about the Third World War. It has named uh, countries which certainly did not exist, 600 years ago. It's pretty fascinating. So, the reason why I brought this into the mix is because the text also says that the people who would have a good spiritual practice would transition to the next phase in evolution. So let's watch out for these 7 years. And, and I have been observing data in terms of those predictions. And the predictions are coming true, actually. They are unfolding. So there is this consistency between the predictions and what has been unfolding since the 29th of March, 2025.
Well, that's fascinating. Yeah. And, you know, the passage that I read at the end from Savitri, the preface to that is, a giant dance of Shiva tore the past. There was a thunder as of worlds that fall. Earth was o'errun with fire and the roar of death, clamoring to slay a world his hunger had made. There was a clangor of destruction's wings. The Titan's battle cry was in my ears. Alarm and rumor shook the armored night. And then I saw the omnipotence flaming pioneers. So there is some precedence for what you're saying in Savitri as well, that these things are part of the necessary pressure, because we don't change. Historically, we don't change without pressure.
Yeah. So Earl, I see that your hand is up. Please come in.
Yeah. Well, first, in regard to what you just said, Kundan, and Santosha's first description of the periods of time, one can't help but note that each subsequent change came in a very, very much shorter period. So we need to keep that in mind as we show patience. But my question went to, well, in your Savitri quote, there was God's laborers, or that we are God's laborers or divine laborers. And we need, in addition to working for realizations to understand all this, these processes, I feel that our responsibility is to take action in this world. That person up on the 5th floor observing, it wouldn't mean anything unless he utilized it in some way, unless he acted in the world. So there's a tremendous amount of tamas and inertia in our actions in the world. So many of us stand by and watch. So would you, in this context of your talk, could you speak to our responsibility for action, taking action in this world with discernment, of course, but as best we can, but we need to act to make things happen. You know, participating in, well, this group is an exception, but for participating in study groups and talking about things all the time and going on to the next study group without acting in the world and is doesn't seem like enough, or it isn't enough. So could you speak to what I'm trying to get at here?
Sure. You know, I've never been known for being inactive, so I guess you could. But actually, I take a somewhat nuanced view of this, if you will. If somebody is called upon, because you know, there's like 8 billion people on the planet. Everybody is called upon to do different things. We're not all called upon to do the same things all the time. So some people, if they're able to become inwardly receptive, to change the energetic flow, to overcome certain forces of ego and desire within themselves and to radiate that force out, that may be more valuable to help texture the consciousness and create the change than someone going out and running a food kitchen or helping sick people or whatever, which all needs to get done. But within the context that I think in one of his aphorisms, Sri Aurobindo pointed out that the French Revolution occurred because a yogi in the Himalayas in a cave was meditating on freedom. And so action needs to be seen as possibly being very subtle. And I try not to judge people based on their outward form of action, but on really let them do what they need to do, what they're moved to do, what baton they're meant to carry in that relay race, whether or not they're out there invisible and doing something that we think is, from our viewpoint, essential. So there's both. And hopefully there's plenty of volunteers to do each of those steps so that they all get done.
Yes, and that's why I use the word discernment, because we each have to try to do our best to discern what we are called to do, what our task is, and of course that's the big challenge we face. That's the task.
Yeah.
Thank you.
If I may add, to this ongoing conversation, I also feel that apart from ego and tamas, the kind of yoga that we are invited to do experiences a lot of hostility to truth, and I am getting to realize that the only way to defeat those forces is by increasing the quality of our own yoga, because those forces are very, very strong. I've experienced them quite extensively, because my area of transition or transformation, if you will, has been India. And for the last 1,000 years or so, the kind of void that was created in India because of external forces, there has been a massive suction, of hostile forces, uh, to the civilization, to its original civilization, if you will. And in order to transform all of that, I personally feel that it requires very sophisticated yoga on my part. And so, the focus keeps coming back to me. If I'm able to raise my own yoga, maybe I will be able to deal with those forces. But if I don't do that, those forces will prevail. So I wish, it were just ego and tamas. Their forces far more sinister. So yes, Margaret, I see.
I'm going to be following up something that you were saying there, Kundan. It came from the Sri Aurobindo Society, but it was a discussion about equanimity. And Sri Aurobindo was saying, kind of along what you were saying, Santosh, that with equanimity, it's very important to have equanimity, but is that enough, right? And he was saying, bringing in, of course, the Gita, where it's clear that it is one must fight the forces. And you were talking about this, Kundan, those forces. And Sri Aurobindo says something like, the forces that would darken or obliterate the truth or hurt the children of light. He's very direct, very similar to what you're saying, Kundan. And so, again, it is nuanced. but it's also being clear-eyed about what our mission is, and that is to serve the truth, or to radiate and support the forces of truth. So anyway, it's interesting that we're all coming at this and saying very similar things.
Yes, Pinchman. You're on mute. Please unmute yourself. Please unmute yourself. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, look like I'm a new face here. Yeah,
Welcome. I'm glad that you have started joining us.
yeah. Thank you very much. I really appreciate this group. Yeah, and actually, I graduated with my PhD in East-West psychology about 2-3 years ago, and now actually I'm writing a book in Mandarin, and I talk about integral yoga psychology, and I use the so we're going to talk about the centric, concentric conscious system and a vertical system and a triple transformation. Yeah, I use this totality of human consciousness as the theoretical foundation for the inner child work, actualizing our essential child. So because I read the Cerebral talk about the natural attitude of the psychic being is to feel itself as the child, the son of the God and the Bhakti. It is a portion of the divine, one in essence. So I just put it, use it as the inner child work to actualize our essential child. So to today's lecture, I would like to get some feedback to see if I understand it right. I heard that you talk about the symbiotic relationship, and can we look at the from the central being to true being, and the inner being, outer being? Is the different portion of our consciousness, which is in the unity of the oneness of our consciousness, and all these different portions are in the symbiotic relationship with each other. Because if the form is the manifestation of the formlessness, so the individual psychic being and or child, inner child is an expression, manifestation of the original mother. Yeah, and if the physical, vital, and mental being and the spiritual aspect of us, they are also symbiotic relationship with each other as the oneness of the consciousness. And because I create some guided meditation in Mandarin for sure. I'm not so confident with my English. That's why when I'm talking, I feel a little bit stressed. Yeah. So, and I created some guided meditation in Mandarin to guiding from the our original mother and connecting with our essential child and the vulnerable child and our protective child, which is our outer personality for sure. So when I created this, is the intention for me is to try to create the connection in between our different parts of consciousness and create the linkage and harmony in us. So I would like to get a little bit feedback because I cannot find any, because I write in Mandarin and I don't know where I can get the support to make sure what I'm doing is in the direction which match to the Aurobindo teaching. Yeah.
Yeah, Santosh, please.
Well, thank you. I'm very appreciative of what you're trying to do. And the idea you bring in that the different parts of the being, the physical, the vital, the mental, and the spiritual are symbiotic to one another is, a very interesting paradigm because they each have their own framework of how they function and what they do. And each of them has to be adapted when the next phase becomes active because they need to find how to live together, so to speak, in one being. And that's that symbiotic relationship. And it's more or less what we were talking about when the new phase of consciousness comes in. It needs to make adjustments to the physical, the vital, and the mental beings so that it can take hold and radiate and bring a new level of harmony and integration into these different parts that right now are not functioning well together in certain ways. So I like your paradigm, and I hope you keep developing this. I know it's difficult to do this in English for you, but I think I picked up what you were trying to say, and I very much appreciate that.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
And I would like to say that I use this model in the work because I'm working with people in China or in Taiwan. I don't have many clients yet because I still focus on writing, but I do some work. And
One very good resource for you would be this compilation by Dr. A.S. Dalal called Our Many Selves. So these different aspects that you were talking about, these different aspects of the outer personalities, how they can be integrated around the central being, which is the psychic being,
yes,
is very beautifully explicated, in that collection, Our Many Selves.
our many selves.
And
Our
if you
many
want to
selves.
get access to that, the blog that we do daily that Kundan gave in the announcement has a folder called Our Many Selves. And we went page by page through that book with the citations from each page and a discussion about it. So it's available to you free of charge, just to go out there. Of course, it's in English, but some of the translation engines may help you. I did some work with ChatGPT, and it's not perfect, but it's better than not having a translation at all. So
I can read English, no problem. It just take time for me to write and to follow.
Of course, yeah. Well, if you go out to the blog, Sri Aurobindo Studies.wordpress.com, on the right side, there are a number of folders for different books that we've done the study on. And one of those is Our Many Selves, by the compilation by Dr. Dalal from Sri Aurobindo and the Mother's Works. And every page of that book is set forth day after day with a commentary. So it's available to you wherever you are.
Okay, sure. Very good. Very good. Thank you so much. Yeah.
You're welcome. You're welcome. More comments, questions?
So I have one more question.
Okay.
So like what I'm doing to create the linkage between different parts of our consciousness. I look at it in a way is to integrate the concentric system and then the vertical system, and I mean psychic transformation and the spiritual transformation and the supramental transformation, because the most center is I use the original mother, the source of our life. And I interpret it as what the Aurobindo talk about, the divine mother. It's the origin of our life. And so it's kind of bringing use our mental, it's still in the mental plan, I understand. But we exercise our mental plan to awaken our supramental consciousness and bring into connection with the different parts of our consciousness. So it's I look at it as a part of the supramental transformation.
Mm.
Yeah, Santosh.
Yes. So I think the approach you're taking is obviously helpful in what you're doing. The new energy that has fixed itself into the earth consciousness, the supramental force,
Yes.
is slowly working or quickly working, if you will, in its, so you might call geographic time scale, not human time scale, to modify, to integrate, and to harmonize the mental, the vital, and the physical levels,
Yes. That's the
so
point.
that they can hold that force and express that force. It's a harmonizing process like you're talking about.
Yes.
And so anything that's done to widen the mental being and the vital and physical being to accept a new energy, a new force, a new understanding, and to find a way to harmonize its action is very helpful.
If if I may add to this, I actually teach a course on Sri Aurobindo's Integral Yoga at Sophia University, and one of the books that I use for this purpose is this compilation by Dr. Dalal called The Greater Psychology.
Hmm.
Now, if there's one area, where I do not agree with him, and I personally feel that, that he makes my work very difficult, is by representing these planes, in a two-dimensional and three-dimensional manner. The mother has spoken on this, quite a few times, where she says that, there's more to the four dimensions that we have come to know and realize. And all these planes, are certainly not arranged in a two or three-dimensional manner. Because see, what happens is that, that when you begin to visualize these planes in an hierarchical fashion, particularly when you look at the staircase model that he has created, you begin to invite this entire diatribe, of academia as far as hierarchy is concerned. And unfortunately, Ken Wilber has contributed massively to this problem, which does not really exist in the worldview of the mother and Sri Aurobindo. So yes, these planes are there. We can go till there, but these planes are not arranged in a two-dimensional or a three-dimensional manner. In order, to really know and experience how these planes are placed, we will basically need to develop a yogic vision in us. All that we can do at this point in time is to know that that these are distinct planes in our existence. They have certain characteristics. They influence our consciousness in distinct ways, and by becoming aware of, uh, of their characteristics, we can work on their transformation. But if we begin to get into this, into this binary of whether these planes are placed in an hierarchical fashion, or, or they are on a flat plane, there will be a problem. Since you're a student at the East West Psychology Department, you have one framework or paradigm in integral psychology at this point in time, which is coming from Ken Wilber, which is hierarchical. And then you have this framework of participatory practice coming from Ferrer. And very unfortunately, these two frameworks are at war with each other. And when you look at the framework of Mother and Sri Aurobindo, there basically is no conflict whatsoever. This yoga has been participatory right from the very beginning, right from its very inception. And the planes have a certain kind of an arrangement, but they are certainly not hierarchical in a three-dimensional manner. So once again, the ignorance of human beings have basically invaded this beautiful cosmology that has actually been presented to us. So I would say, my suggestion to you is, if you can set aside, these two frameworks and not get into them, it will be better, so.
Well, I'll add one thing to that, and that's that scientists recently found out that they could do something with light to touch 37 dimensions at one time. And if you read in the Taittiriya Upanishad, the what I call the calculus of bliss, human bliss is at the bottom of that range. And then there's like 10 or 12 ranges above that of further integrated planes or beings or forces, whatever, that are far beyond our human perception. And so the human being tends to, with the mental forces, we get to gridlock, we get to arguments and fighting and positions that we take, but we need to move beyond that. And the supramental force is meant to harmonize all those different views into a comprehensive, holistic view that is not argumentative, but integrative.
Yeah, sometimes I don't use the original mother, essential mother, experimental consciousness, because it just doesn't happen at that moment. Then I don't use it, and I use it only when I feel, oh, there is something, and kind of is kind of a timing. Then I try to do a little bit, just remind how is the original mother will say to you, this hurtful child, and then sometimes it just click, and something harmonized, nourished, and something changed, something just something kind of repaired. The outer personality get repaired. So sometimes it happens, sometimes it's not, but it doesn't matter. I just follow the flow.
Okay, on that note, why don't we have a brief meditation and then we'll break. A very brief meditation, let's go inside, focus. Thank you very much, Santosh, for this beautiful presentation. You have absolutely made our day. Enjoy the rest of the day, all of you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone, for joining.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Santosh.
All of your contributions. Thank you very much, Santosh. Glad to see everyone.